So, Rahul, good evening, and thank you for agreeing to come on this small, informal interview with me.
Sure thing. It's a privilege.
Thank you so much. For those of you who don't know Rahul, he's Vice President at Intuit, and he heads two very important verticals there. Has been head of engineering, but now looks after TurboTax and Mint, as far as I know. Correct me if I'm wrong anywhere, Rahul. This is just to give a background.
Sure thing.
Okay, so Rahul, now the whole purpose of this discussion is how do I get into the leader's mind? And Rahul, I look at you as being one of the great leaders that we have in corporate world in India. And I'm trying to understand, how does your mind work? What happens when you're stressed out? Do you do anything to plan, like strategically, tactically? Just general. So if you can start off with just giving us a little bit about your background and
Yes.
what makes you a leader, I think that would set the tone for the rest of the discussion.
Absolutely. So, very humble beginnings. Grew up in a small town called Dehradun. It's far up north. Grew up running around in the mountains, having fun always, with a great family, joint family. And that spirit of joint family continues till today. I did my bachelor's in Dehradun itself, and then came to Bangalore, learned programming in Bangalore, and started my career with at a time when there was no internet. So learning was essentially by talking to different people, and learning was by reading and just seeking out information. The information wasn't available at your fingertips. And I think that that quest for learning kind of continues today.
Right.
So I learn today by talking to people like yourself, and many others. And in terms of how I became a leader as such, I think everybody's a leader. It's just how anybody who can help another person is a leader.
Wow.
The more people you can help succeed, you become a bigger leader. But I think that's the spirit of leadership, is about helping others succeed. And we all do it. Each one of us do it every single day. We just do it as out of human nature, out of what we do. We don't necessarily call it leadership, but it is. And I think that's, if you just kind of become a little more focused about it, recognize those opportunities, do a little bit more, spend more time helping others than helping yourself, I think you just tend to kind of grow into that role.
Awesome. So thank you so much, Rahul. That gives us a nice snapshot of who Rahul is and how he rose up the ladder. I think the key point that you brought up there is helping others.
Yes.
And one of the things that I say often is that leaders have to make more leaders.
Yes.
And you're one of the good leaders that I have worked closely with, where I find that you were more keen on developing others than developing yourself. And just as a background for all the rest who are listening to this, there was a time when Rahul almost avoided rising up the corporate ladder because he said, I want to be leaving my team behind. I remember that conversation with you, Rahul. Thinking, wow, here's a selfless guy who wants to help others. And I really thought, and that's why I pushed you that time. I said, Rahul, if you can go further up the corporate ladder, you get a higher level of people to grow. And I think what is required for all of us is to reach the highest level that we are capable of reaching.
Yes.
And then to help people at that level. So I believe we can't always help the people very low down because we have already reached higher. So the cascading effect, of you help one level or two levels down, and then somebody else helps 1-2 levels down. And so everybody gets a chance to play leadership, just like you said.
Absolutely.
So are there any good leaders that you have worked with and you picked up 1 or 2 tips from? If you don't mind, give us those tips so that we learn not only from you, Rahul, but from the leaders who helped you grow.
Yeah, several of them all around me. I think I'm a product of all of those people contributing into my success. It's and my philosophy in general in life is to uh, learn something from each person I meet and teach something to each person I meet. And I think that so if I have to pick a few, uh, you know, one of my current manager, who's Keith Olson, I've learned so many things from him. The way that he makes decisions,
Right.
the way he separates the noise from what's really relevant. And I think part of being a great leader is to be able to make good decisions and help your team make good decisions. And often what comes in the way of decisions are the distractions. So how do you identify what's distracting and what's really core to what the decision needs to be made?
Right.
Uh, One of my earlier managers, Nat Natrajan, who I just loved his the way that he would change careers and go into unknown areas. And if you look at his career trajectory, he's done like a dozen different roles over the years, each one being very new to him, and the boldness with which you can enter a situation with the confidence that you will succeed,
Right.
not because you are so good, but because you believe that people around you will help you succeed. And I think if I look at Vijay Anand, who was the IDC head of Intuit earlier, he's been somebody that I've learned humility and selflessness. Always available for others to. For anybody at any point in time, you could always lean on Vijay, and that trust. And when you have that trust and you're not looking backwards, you can move faster.
Right.
There is no way you can run fast forward if you have to constantly watch your back. So the way that you build trust is something that I learned a lot from Vijay, and there are several other folks all around. I'll just pick the three for today's conversation.
Very nice. Very nice. So I learned a lot from that, and you brought in a lot of key factors. One of them was humility and trust, separating the noise from what's really relevant, and then trusting people so that you don't have to keep on looking at your back, and also being able to change. I think this post-COVID world, I think change is going to be one of the most important things. Change, innovation.
Absolutely.
So now you've been in a company where you've been there for quite some time, I'm thinking now.
Yes, sir.
So
years now.
On a personal level, do you have something that you do on a regular basis to say, this is the new Rahul, this is me, and you can't ignore me? Or are there any tips and hacks that you can give for other leaders who want to grow fast on the corporate ladder?
Yeah, absolutely. No magic pill. I think the interesting thing about growth is that you got to have a solid foundation.
Right.
So never stop doing what's really foundational to the job. But I think there are, the thing about leadership is to be able to do and sign up for things that nobody else really may want to do.
Wow.
And I think it's also keeping an open mind about what the world is going to throw at you, what the universe is going to throw at you. And COVID is one such thing. And I think as that happened, I remember early on, and running TurboTax is a big deal. And we have hundreds of thousands of customers who come to us to file their taxes, and tax filing is generally a stressful experience.
Right, you're right.
And we want to make sure our systems are working well. But here we are, where everybody is in different parts of the city, and what happens if they need support and help? And I think we were worried about whether people will be able to collaborate and work with each other. And I think once the problems were put out there, it wasn't like I had to come up with the solution.
Right.
In fact, the teams themselves came up with the solution. I think so just getting into that with the mindset that here is a problem that we need to solve. And today, the team's productivity is higher than what it used to be,
I see.
because now we have cut down on unnecessary meetings, because meetings on videos are harder, harder on you personally. And so that's saving time. People are able to adjust to not having to spend hours in traffic. We're spending more offline means of collaborating, so that
Right.
things are happening always. So I think every situation is an opportunity to actually solve the problem that has risen. And not once did we skip a beat.
That's true.
Not once. We knew that this is tough, but we also knew that we have the team and the people to succeed in whatever is tough out here.
What's the one thing that you told your team to keep them on track and not miss a beat?
I think when you're far apart, you cannot see each other. Um, it's important to continue to over communicate a little bit in different ways.
Right.
So normally if somebody's sitting next to each other, they're working on something, and once you're done and you in happiness get up and throw your arms up, the other person doesn't have to be told that you finished what you were doing. But now you cannot see that body language anymore. You cannot see that exhilaration that people may be feeling. So you got to tell it. So you got to be more deliberate about keeping in touch with each other. And we work with very smart people. They know how to do what they need to do. So it's never a question whether they can do it or not. It's only about creating the environment where they can thrive.
Awesome. Rahul, one of the things that, I remember when we were talking, doing our coaching conversations, you seem to be very comfortable with people who matter to you, and you felt responsible for them.
Yes.
Right. And so I see this a lot with Indian leaders.
Yes.
So is there anything that you could say to Indian leaders? Because, today I think competitiveness is important. Rising up the ladder faster is important. You can't come to a 50-year of age and then say, I should have been a little more aggressive. So did you learn some things along the way? And if so, what advice would you give people in India with people who are, much humble? And, one of the things that we got is we don't ask for promotions. Would you like to say something about that?
Yeah, I think I've learned along the way that it is important to ask. Right. And it may be cultural to us that we feel hesitant to ask for stuff. But I think it's not about, the question is, why are you asking? And if you change the frame of mind with which you're asking something, you're not asking because you want more money. I think you'll eventually earn more money anyway. Right? You're asking because you want to make a greater impact on the people and teams around you. Right. So I think if you change the frame from which you are approaching the ask, it may become more comfortable, right? I mean, a similar thing, Ian, that I learned over the years, and you've helped me do that as well, is talking about your victories. We hesitate because we say, hey, we shouldn't be talking about, we don't want to be, just kind of beating our own drum, and people should recognize us for the work that we do. And I think that's great. I think people will. But, we know each other by the stories we know about each other. Right? So if you're not willing to tell your story, I don't know who else would be. Right? And who is the best person to tell the story? And the reason for it is not you. The reason for it is your story is your team's story. You're doing it because your team's story needs to get out there. And I think as leaders, it's very important to stay connected with the team stories, and hence figure out a way where these stories actually come to you. So for example, in our staff meeting, we start with a 15-minute sharing of success stories. And that helps everybody learn about what a success is happening in everybody else. And people get more comfortable talking about success stories because this is a safe environment, right? You're not doing it for a promotion. You're doing it because you want to share it with your peers. And I think it's a little bit of a muscle building, but it's so important.
So,
I think, the more people know about you, the more they can come and support you and help you and your team succeed. If they don't know, they really don't, if they don't know about what you're working on, what your successes are, how can they come in and then you hear like, hey, I'm not getting support from X, Y, and Z. Of course.
wow. This is the new Rahul I'm seeing now. So I'm so glad you're talking about these success stories, and it's so important for the team. It's so important for the org as well, that they
Exactly.
know that your team is doing well, and also that sense of accomplishment. Now, each person doing better up the corporate ladder, also his family gets the cascading benefit of that.
Yes.
So I
Yes.
think it's relevant on
Absolutely.
so many fronts. Sorry, Rahul, you were saying something.
Yeah, I just wanted to add on the success stories is I think there's another dimension to it, which is about being self-critical as well.
Mhm.
So it's not always that you're talking about what's great, but also talking about where there is more opportunity to be great. And I think that you know um, knowing where we need to move the needle is part of being mature about what we need to do next. So it's not just about, hey, these are all the great things we did, but also finding the right opportunities to be self-critical and say, here are the areas where we would like to do better.
Thank you. That was a very detailed answer. Very nice. Thank you so much, Rahul. I really appreciate that. Any tips on handling diverse teams? Because I know you're a good people person, so maybe you can give us some tips on that.
Um, Handling means in
Like for instance, somebody is an analytical guy.
yes,
Somebody is creative, no, right brain. He doesn't keep his schedules. He just takes it easy, does things last minute. I mean, how
yeah,
do you handle people that are diverse like that? Because you're a guy who's a good planner. You're an analyst.
yeah,
You're very organized in a lot of ways.
yes. I still feel I'm very disorganized, but I have, given a choice, I'd rather be disorganized. But
Okay.
uh,
So how
but
do
I
you
think
handle an organized guy then?
but I think it's important to be organized when you have a large responsibility. Um, I think uh, you know a couple of things here, and may not be a direct answer here. In One is, I think there is an individual personality, and there is a personality of a team, right? Sometimes we think about individual personalities, but we don't always think about a team personality.
Right.
So, what is the team personality that you would want to develop, right? And how does your personality show is with the things you do. Similarly, how does a team personality show is what the team does,
Mm.
right? So it's important to figure out, what are the team rituals? What is the culture of a team? Because a team can succeed when um, when everybody's very direct, they call out when things are wrong. Or a team can also succeed when everybody is very cordial and they wait for the right opportunity to bring up if something is wrong.
Right.
Both cultures are valid. You got to decide what kind of culture you're going to be and then develop the rituals around it so that these things happen. Um, the second is, I think, as individuals, I've seen this happen a lot where people say, I am like this only. I cannot be organized, right? I am like this only, right? And and I think that is just a false um, that's a false notion of self sometimes. I think it's the story that we tell ourselves that I am disorganized.
Mhm.
And the more I tell myself I'm disorganized, I'm likely to be disorganized,
Yes.
right? And I think it's important to know, nobody wants you to become like heavily organized if your basic personality is to be disorganized. And you may succeed being disorganized. I know of people who have succeeded. Um, but then you have to understand that when you're part of the team, there is an impact of your behavior on others,
That's true.
right? So So I think it's important to understand what level of organization is needed so that others are not impacted
Right.
negatively with it, right? I think my rule book is essentially about you can do whatever you want as long as it doesn't hurt others.
Mm-hmm.
But if you're part of the team, you got to solve for the team. All right. So, and I think that's how you learn from each other. So, usually, I would like to pair people up where they can learn from each other. So, and bring in the notion of team, and
Right.
say, hey, here is what the team does. Team first, individuals next.
Get it. So there was another very clear answer. Rahul, I want to push this a little bit more. If
Sure.
the team has to be successful, you're saying, on one hand, you have to have that, we have to look at the individual. On another hand, we have to look at the team culture and ethos.
Yes.
Now, where does the company come into all this? Because, some leaders feel if I help my team members grow, they will do more for the company because they feel this company looks after them.
Yes.
Some other leaders feel, boss, if they don't do the company's work, then the company is paying them. What are we paying them for? We're not there to handle their personal issues and their personal growth plans. Where do you, feel a good leader should be?
I think at the end of the day, Ian, we work with people, right? And if you and there is only one us. There is only your personal and professional lives are not super different. The things that if you're the things that you learn in your personal life help you professionally. The things that you learn in professional life help
Right.
you personally.
Yes.
So I think it's really important to treat a person as a whole self, not as a machine to produce output. That doesn't work. I think, and what makes it interesting in our industry is the fact that we have so much diversity of thought, so many different people, and uh, and honestly, it's just more fun when people can do what they want to do without having to feel like they're sacrificing one aspect over the other.
And work-life balance, does it matter, or just work first and then life balance we'll see later?
I think balance has perhaps been overused word or incorrectly used word here. I think it's work-life quality. Right? What is the quality of work that you are doing, and what is the quality of life you're living? Uh, it's not balance. Nothing is balanced as such, right? Who said balance is the right thing?
Mm-hmm.
That was when perhaps 100 years ago, when work was seen as only a means to earn a living, and you could work 5 hours a day and then have a life after that. Today it's not the same. You work every minute and you live every minute as well. So in COVID times, this has been completely out of whack right now. I'm in a meeting and there'll be a ring on the door, and I have to go and receive a package from somewhere. Um, you know, Somebody shows up, somebody calls in, your sprinklers are running, you got to switch them off. Uh, how are you going to separate these things? You can't. It is getting more and more integrated.
Right.
I remember my father would come home every day, dot on 5 o'clock, right, or 5:10, because he worked in ordnance factories, and at 4:45 there would be a alarm that will go off because the factory is going to shut and everybody's going to go home. We don't have alarms going off anymore at any time. You're always on. So let's focus on the quality of life and the quality of work that we do. And that yields better results.
Would you like to share something on this personal level? Because you said we are holistic creatures. Rahul, the leader, versus Rahul, the husband. I mean, you're saying both are the same. So how does it fit?
It's really true. I've written a blog on my LinkedIn, which is called "How Intuit Helped Me Be a Better Parent."
Wow.
And it truly did, because uh, the notion that every single person is a leader is something that I learned at Intuit. And when I learned that and I questioned myself and said, am I treating my kids as leaders?
Nice.
Or am I treating them as somebody who should follow what others are saying, right? Including me. Say, hey, this is right and this is wrong, versus helping them find their own path. And I think I realized that maybe I'm not, right? And they will not become leaders one day. There's not a switch that happens, right? It's something that you do every day, right? It's a gradual process. And I think that changed my behavior towards my kids. And, as I look at my kids and how they behave and where do they spend time, they spend a lot of time playing video games. I've got two boys, so, video games are their world. I realized that when I have young engineers coming into my team from all these wonderful colleges, they were very keen on buying a video game for that we could keep in the office and play whenever they wanted. And I said, please go for it. All right.
Wow.
And in another world, I would have not done it if I had not transferred that philosophy from my home to work. It's one life, different set of people, but the foundations remain the same.
So you've been in quite a few good companies, and I know the top two of those would be Oracle and Intuit. Culturally, are we quite different in terms of companies? I'm just saying general. I don't want you to give something specific about these two companies, but what you've picked up along the way, if you can make a more generic, understanding for us, how do we shift from one culture to the other, those kind of things.
Yeah, absolutely. And the two companies you mentioned have very different cultures for good reason. As a diverse mindset, every culture is good culture. There is nothing, that's the way that it was supposed to be, and it formed for a certain reason. I think what is important is to realize that in order to succeed in a culture, you gotta really spend time and understand why that culture exists. And because culture is not stated, you don't walk in and somebody gives you a handbook of culture. I didn't get it at Intuit, a handbook of culture. It's just there. It's in the air. And culture and that's what makes it harder, is you have to read. You have to read what's really happening around you, because culture often sets implicit expectations, right? I mean, for example, if when I meet my friends, the expectation is that we'll shake hands, we'll do a fist bump. If I meet my uncles and aunts and I do a fist bump, I don't think they will put their fist out there. It just doesn't happen. It's not the implicit expectation is that you have your hands folded. And these things are not explained to anyone. So you got to be a little perceptive about what's happening, and it plays out everywhere. It's really important to understand the culture, because that's how we work with each other. So if you have a conflict, what is the expectation in that conflict? If you're going to work together, then what is the expectation of each other? Right? How much information will you share or not? So I think culture is one of those things, and that is where EQ plays a big role.
Yeah, sure.
And I think it's important that we all understand how we work, so that we can then figure out what about us that we need to change. Because just because we enter the new company, the company is not about to change. It is our onus to change.
That's true. So
just having that mindset, really helps. And asking people, when I joined Intuit, after several years of working at Oracle in my previous company, one of the things I did is I met, the first 30 days, I met over 30 people. And to each one, I asked them, what are your recommendations for me as I walk into this company.
Brilliant. Mm.
And I had so much input, which helped shape my journey in a new culture, in a new company. So I think it's okay to ask.
It's okay to ask, yeah.
Yeah.
And I think we should develop that attitude of asking rather than assuming. I think assuming always lands us in problem, but asking, clarifying, always gets us higher up the ladder.
Absolutely. And it again comes down to humility about that, yes, your opinion, your input is needed for me to succeed.
Okay, Rahul, one thing that I want to ask, since you're a good leader and you have a practical way of handling things, and when I'm doing a lot of these webinars with companies to say post-COVID what, so I give my own philosophy on that. Yeah. But there's one question that comes up again and again and again. Initially when this lockdown was announced, a lot of people felt happy. I'm going to be at home and I don't have to travel to work and spend travel time back and all this. And now what people are realizing, Rahul, is, what, this is a pain because 24 hours they expect me to be on call. Suddenly they say, it's only 11 o'clock, right? Whole day you're at home. So what's the problem? What is the advice you would give, people in India who can't say no? They are there at a meeting at 11 o'clock, but they are all beja fried by then. And they don't even know to say no. They don't even know how to ask for something. Is there any hack that you can give some of the Indian guys who are feeling bad to say no, or they don't know what to do? What would you say to them?
Absolutely. One thing is we got to realize that this is the new normal. So we have to figure out a new way of working with it. So the old methods may not work. But to your specific question, Ian, about what can folks do if they feel hesitant about it? Mm-hmm. I think it's whenever I'm in a place where I'm not able to do something, my natural leaning is to find somebody who I can bond with, who I can partner with in order to overcome that. So, if I'm not able to say it, let me work with my team, maybe set up a new team ritual where we say, hey, from 5 or 4 o'clock till 9 o'clock, all of us will not talk to each other.
Nice.
Right? You can say that to maybe people that you work with. And then if somebody says, hey, I want you to be on call at 7 o'clock, and say, well, we try as a team not to be there. Right? Because you're not just doing it for yourself, you're doing it for the team. Because if you accept, then the team has accepted it. So sometimes, just finding the people who can help you, and you can band together, and there is strength in numbers to come up with what really works. That may be one way of just dealing with it.
That's a wonderful idea. One of the things I give them is to say that, between, let's say, 11 o'clock and 5 o'clock in the evening, we can have any meetings that you want.
Yeah.
But outside of that, please find out whether we are available. So then you're making a bandwidth. It's like your intermittent fasting. You're saying, I can eat for 6 hours. The rest of the 18 hours, I don't touch anything. So something like that. I thought the new normal is also going to start to specify this. What's a bandwidth, Indian Standard Time, where, they can make sure that the meeting is at, let's say, 11 or 12 or 1 or 2, but they got that window and they can set the meetings there.
Yes.
Something like a common minimum program that governments use to stay in power.
Yeah, I think it once again comes down to the team rituals that you want to set, right? So
that's a good idea, Rahul. That's such a good idea. I'm going to take this and I'm going to use it, and I'm going to give you credit for that.
Sure thing.
So, you're such a good leader, and I think a lot of leaders can emulate their lives on you. So the top 3 things that Rahul would like to say makes Rahul a super leader. The top 3 things are?
It's hard for me to think in those terms. I think the things that help me, do what I need to do. One is just having that sense of uh, consumption and contribution. What you're taking in and what you're giving out, and your contribution should always be more than what you consume. And it applies to anywhere. It could be environment, it could be your team. What your team is giving you, can you give back more to your team? Could be individuals, could be your kids, your spouse. That's one philosophy in general, is the spirit of contribution first. um, and sometimes the contribution may not come back at all, or may come back in 10 years. Who knows? But the world has this interesting way of coming back to you. So second is, I think, keeping and understanding the environment, the culture uh, that you're in, because you could be a great runner, but great runner in the plains may not succeed as a great runner in the mountains. So knowing the terrain that you're in, knowing the landscape, the culture, the expectation, allows you to then navigate within that, right? So you got to move. And my philosophy is move like water. Wherever you find a barrier, go around it, go over it, break it if you can. Right? So move like water. Um, and the third thing is, I think, keeping an eye on and knowing what success is and what success means, because there is so much to do. There are so many needs, there are so many people, so many goals to achieve, but which among them would truly matter versus not? So, excuse me. I think this, because that allows you to focus and put your energy into where it matters most. Because as you grow, your concerns grow, your world grows, the number of people you have to meet grows, and you just have to figure out what makes the biggest difference to what you care about, what your people care about.
Awesome. You actually gave me three things and nicely spaced out also. I found very nice. Rahul, thank you so much. That was brilliant. Okay, just a few quick answers from your side.
Sure.
Even one word, two word, one sentence is fine. What can we expect from Rahul on the road ahead?
And more, probably contributing more to building leadership in the company, in the ecosystem that I live in.
If you were Prime Minister, what would you change?
I think education system with more focus on building personality, boldness, a culture where teaching is done through questions and answers, not a download of stuff. I mean, we don't teach our kids how to ask great questions, and asking great questions is so important.
Very nice. That's a clear answer. If there's one thing that you learned from COVID, what is it?
I think COVID taught us we are more adaptable than we think we can be. I think we were married to many other behaviors which suddenly have vanished. I said, just like getting people in a room for lots of meetings, and working across oceans. One of the disadvantages of being in India versus being in the US, where your larger team maybe, is that you're on the screen while everybody else was in the room. And people say, hey, it's really difficult to collaborate when you're on the screen. Guess what? It is. That's where everybody is going to be. I mean, it does have set up a level playing field in some way, but certainly I think it has broken some of these myths also. So
that was so nicely called out again. So Rahul, if there's one thing that you would tell kids today, youngsters, what would you tell them?
I think uh, I am in awe of our next generation, the kind of confidence that they have, and I'm glad they're not like us. They're way more mature, way more solid. Um, One thing that I would tell them is, you know, uh, don't forget the history of where you come from. There are lots of lessons in there, um, and and maybe the second thing would be to just question everything that comes your way. Right? Don't stop questioning. I think there is still a little bit of hesitancy in our system because a lot of our school system does not encourage questioning.
That's very true.
So, yeah, so I would encourage every youngster to just ask more and more questions. Everything that shows up, ask why, what. Continue asking that. So that's what leads to the right kind of answers coming out.
Fantastic. You wrote one book already, Rahul.
Yes.
Would you like to tell us quickly about that and tell us what your next book could be about in case you're planning one?
The first book was really out of my own experiences of growing from being a technical leader into a manager. And then learning over the years things that I could have done better if I'd known this, if I'd known that. And over the years, I was helping other tech leads become managers, and that book is really about how to grow from being an individual contributor to a manager, especially in the technology world. So it's sort of context sensitive, but it's nothing but a lot of basics of being a good manager and a leader adapted to the technology world. The next book, if I think about it, I think it would be just I see a lot of folks get stuck in the middle. I think a lot of folks are able to get to like a pre-director level. They push hard to get to a director level, and that's really hard. Very few actually make it to that VP level of. And I think there is, and there are things that you can do in order to kind of break out of that. And that process probably starts a lot earlier than when you're at a certain point. But that's I think there is a space for it. There is I don't think it requires there can be a handbook, but there's definitely a space where people can learn from experiences of folks who actually broke through that into the senior leadership versus not.
Excellent. I have one last closing question for you, Rahul.
Sure.
This is going to be a deep one if you ask me. There are two options now going ahead. One was what Thomas Friedman talked about, and the world is flat.
Yes.
So I'm saying that is one scenario, and the world might get flat again. The other scenario is like Donald Trump building a wall, and therefore each country starts to build walls around itself and says, our people will stay here and we will do all our work here, and that's it. No more farming out work to India and other countries. So in the first scenario, the world is flat. What is the one thing a leader should do? And in the second, where we're building walls around ourselves, let's say only in India, leaders from India, for India, what would the leaders do? Two answers I'm looking from you.
Sure. I think the world is flat, and it's great that it's flat. I can't remember the quote that I read somewhere was that trade and working across countries is actually what prevents wars. People actually, countries get into war because they don't care about each other. But if you're helping each other be successful, then you're more likely to collaborate than not. But I think in the world is flat and it's getting flatter. So that's the number of services that you could get physically um, the number of services that you could get digitally is increasing every year.
That's true.
So we would think of things like going to a doctor as a physical service. Not anymore.
Not
We
really.
just, I already had like online consultation in the last few months. So I think a lot more is happening, which means that you get access to anywhere in the world. So it brings the best of the world to your doorstep. So I think it's the right direction, and we should just continue pushing in that way. I think as individuals, let's figure out how we can use services from different places and countries.
Super.
So then I'm going for like I see folks wanting to learn Spanish. You could learn Spanish from somebody in Spain.
Yeah. Technically.
Right? You don't have to look for a tutor around you. So there are more opportunities to use services from across the world than we think there are. In the walled garden world, I think it's unfortunate, in my opinion, because boundaries are a barrier to progress in general. I think it's also important that you have a core that you can depend on, and never outsource the core. Right. So if you are, um, if you are, if you're building technology, there is a core of technology that exists. So like Intel should always be focused on the core of their capabilities, which is building the chips that they need to build. And you can collaborate with people, but you should always have that foundation. So having that strong foundation, a core that you can always rely on, which you are the best at, right? And when you say you are the best at, you're competing with the world. Mm-hmm. So you got to elevate your core to that strength, which you are the best at. And that will give you the foundation to kind of, have that long life, have that long cycles of innovation, because you can build and stand on that foundation. So I think same thing for India. I think in the mobile world, India needs to make mobile phones locally. It is core to the system. You cannot rely on another country providing you mobile technology. It doesn't make any sense. It is, half the things will stop today if we do that, right? So I think we need to continue to realize what core is to us as a person, as a team, as a family, as a country, and continue to invest in that core.
Absolutely. Last question. What's the biggest lesson you learned in life? And
I think every lesson is a biggest lesson, and I think. But I think the biggest lesson in general that I have learned is that somehow if you have the confidence and you seek the help, you will find your path. You'll find people who would help you. So you shouldn't be afraid to take the risks that we need to take. Because there are so many other people who would help you succeed anyway. So I think while the world is competing, the world is also getting more and more collaborative. Today, if you look at 50 years ago how a car was built versus today how a car is built, there are more parts coming from 50 different countries to build the same car that in 50 years ago you would build every single part yourself. So I think there is more collaboration. So just believing in that the world is here to help you succeed. So just go take your chances and see what happens. And even if you fail, there is learning. So.
Awesome. So I'm looking at the new Rahul version 2.0, 3.0. I'm sure you read yourself many times, Rahul. It's always a pleasure to talk to you, and I've enjoyed this, just chit chat with you. I'm sure a lot of other leaders are going to benefit from it. So you being a great people person, moved from a technology background into managing people, and I think that's your core competence in a lot of ways today. So while technology is the backbone, I think the front end is people. And I really thank you for that. And you are a classic example of how a good leader can be. I've learned a lot from you, and therefore I would like to thank you for that. And I'd like to thank you also on behalf of the people who are going to learn from you. So with your permission, I'm going to share this video, and I'm going to help more Indian leaders become better leaders.
Thank you, Ian, for the opportunity. And as you know, you've been a big part of this journey, and I have nothing but gratitude. And even today, when I have a question that is troubling me, I send you a single message, and within 30 seconds, I get a response from you to say, "Okay, how can I help?" And I think that's just big. I know always I have somebody to lean on and somebody who has my back. So thank you, Ian, for everything that
You're a nice guy. Nobody can say no to you, Rahul. So all the best to you, to Seema, the kids, and may the new Rahul be much more powerful, much more visible, and I'm looking forward to that.
Thank you, Ian.
Thank you. All the best.